Have you ever heard knocking sounds from inside a freshly cemented grave? I have. On the very first night after finishing the grave at the edge of the village, a nameless grave. With no relatives, only an old weathered headstone with faint, blurred letters and a strange incense stick that burned while dripping blood onto the soil, I heard it. I'm a grave builder, nearly 30 years in this profession. I've gotten used to the smell of cement, the clink of bricks, and even the crying during funerals. But that night, what I heard wasn't from the living. It wasn't the wind either. It was 3 distinct knocks, from within the layer of unset concrete. Do you believe it? Or do you think I'm imagining things? That's okay. I didn't believe it either, until 3 days later, when I reopened that grave with my own hands. And since then, my life began to change. My name is Wah. I'm 58 years old. A grave builder by trade. This job, no one in my village wants it. Everyone's afraid of yin energy, afraid of touching the dead, afraid of bad luck, but I'm not. I've done this since I was young. Because back then, my father, a quiet, solemn old man, was also a grave builder for hire in the area. He taught me how to lay bricks, how to mix mortar evenly, and how to pour concrete so the top layer doesn't crack away from the base. I still remember one thing he told me. You're building a house for someone who no longer breathes. Don't be careless. Don't just finish it. You must make it peaceful for them. For over 30 years, I've stuck with the trowel, the shovel, the cement, and the gravel. Every year, I'd take on a few graves. Some were grand, like small houses with tiled roofs, granite cladding, stone statues. Others were just modest headstones hastily placed under a beetle or jackfruit tree, for the poor. Or for children who never even got a name. I didn't discriminate. Whoever hired me, I worked for them. After finishing, I'd light a stick of incense, bow my head to the deceased, and that would be the end of my part. This July, I got a strange phone call. It was from Mr. Fan, a former commune official who used to hire me to build war hero graves. He said, "Wah, there's an old grave down at the edge of the village. The ground's all uneven. Tried planting things there a few times, but everything just withers and rots. You should rebuild it to make the place decent. I'll cover the cost. Consider it an act of charity." I hesitated. An abandoned grave, no name. Who's going to worship it? Mr. Fan mumbled, "No one's fine. At least don't let it crumble. Can't bear to look at it." I agreed. The next afternoon, I brought my tools. The spot he mentioned was right by the forest line, about 200 meters from the village edge. Overgrown grass, soft soil. Half the grave had caved in. Only the old stone marker remained. The writing almost completely faded. I wiped it down with a cloth and revealed 3 words: Nyan Ti Kong. It gave me chills. Strange name, no clear gender, no birth date, no death date, and it didn't look like it was engraved by a professional. The letters were shallow, faint, like someone just scratched them in hastily. I began clearing the foundation and laying a new base. Because the soil was too soft, I added an extra layer of gravel. I worked alone for 3 straight days. The sun was scorching, sweat pouring non-stop, but somehow, every time I took a break, I felt like someone was watching me from afar. I'd blink, and they'd be gone. At first, I thought I was just tired. By the 2nd and 3rd time, I felt uneasy. By the 4th, I didn't dare look back anymore. That night, I mixed mortar and poured the final layer of concrete. Around 8 p.m., the wind picked up. Trees rustled. My flashlight, placed atop the grave, flickered constantly. I leaned over, pouring and muttering under my breath, "May you rest in peace. I've done my best, clean, solid, proper. Didn't take a single extra penny." Right then, I heard a tap, soft. Then another, and another. 3 taps, clear as day, from beneath the still wet concrete. I froze, trowel still in hand, holding my breath. Another tap, as if someone was using a fingernail, or something sharp, to knock from inside. I didn't dare look. I stood up, packed my tools while shaking, and went straight home, without looking back once. That night, I couldn't sleep, just lay there breathing heavily. Those 3 knocks playing over and over in my head. The next morning, I returned. The concrete had set, but right in the center, there was a handprint. Clearly human, 5 fingers, pressed deep into the surface. And I remembered. I had smoothed it out with a ruler after pouring. No one had walked over it. No one had touched it. I sat there, stunned, then told myself I was imagining things. Maybe it was just an uneven patch from the cement or a rock. I took my trowel and scraped lightly. The handprint didn't disappear. The more I scraped, the more defined it became. I shuddered. I told Mr. Fan. He was quiet for a long while. Then asked, "Did you see anyone near the site?" I shook my head. No, but there were times I heard someone walking barefoot on dry leaves. More than once. He sighed. "Do you remember Nyan?" I flinched. Nyan who? The girl who used to sell sweet soup, disappeared from the market. No one ever found her body. Some said she was kidnapped. Others said she drowned, but your father always suspected she was buried alive somewhere. And now, seeing that stone marker, I'm really starting to wonder. I stayed silent. My chest felt heavy. Suddenly, I remembered one night, years ago. My father came home at midnight, covered in cement, his face pale, hands stained with reddish mud. I asked him what he'd been doing. He simply said, "Sealed a place no one wanted to touch. Sealed it to keep it at peace." Now thinking back, maybe he was the one who built that grave originally. And now I was rebuilding it. But why were there knocking sounds? I don't have an answer yet. But in my heart, I know there's something left unsaid. Someone still hasn't found peace. And I have accidentally disturbed it. After seeing that strange handprint on the concrete, I developed a habit of visiting the grave every morning, as if I was trying to confirm something I still couldn't fully believe. I didn't tell anyone except Mr. Fan, because even I wasn't sure if I was imagining things. But something was odd. Every time I stood in front of that grave, I felt uneasy. Maybe it was the wind rustling through the jackfruit tree behind it, or the early morning sunlight reflecting off the stone surface. But there was a very real feeling, as if someone had just been there. Just minutes before I arrived. I'm not superstitious. Every time I build a grave for someone, I don't check horoscopes or pick auspicious days. I just do my work with conscience, solid, clean, and tidy. If the family wants a ceremony, I help light incense. If they don't believe in anything, I still bow out of respect for the deceased. But ever since that strange grave, I started to dream, vague dreams. I couldn't see the face, just the silhouette of a woman in a brown blouse, long hair covering her face, standing with her back to me at a distance. Whenever I stepped closer, she would vanish. I told my son Oot and his wife about it. They live in the city. He laughed and said, "Dad's been around the graveyard too long. He's spooked. Come stay with us for a few months to clear your mind." I declined, not because I feared the city, but because I felt this wasn't over yet. One afternoon, I passed by Mr. Fan's house, planning to ask more about the woman named Nyan that he mentioned earlier. He was sitting out front, staring into the distance. When he saw me, he sighed. "I've been wondering if we know something but don't say it. Is that a sin, Wah?" I sat beside him, quietly waiting. He went on, "Back then, your father told me once, when you were just a little boy in 2nd grade, a woman came to the house. Her face was pale, her voice strange. She asked your dad to take her out of the village. After that, she was never seen again. 3 days later, your father came home pale as a sheet, his hands scratched up. From that point on, he kept to himself, never went out at night, lit incense every evening but never explained why." Hearing that, I felt a chill down my spine. My memories of my father were always vague. But one thing I remembered clearly: he always kept a wooden box locked in the family altar cabinet, and never let anyone touch it. That night, for the first time in over 10 years since his passing, I opened that old altar cabinet. The box was still there. The lock was rusted. I used pliers to cut it. Inside was an old photo, faded with age. In the photo, my father stood beside a woman in a brown blouse, her long hair tied back, holding a bunch of fresh tea leaves. They stood in front of a patch of earth, which I recognized as the exact spot where I had rebuilt the abandoned grave. I held the photo, heart pounding. Beneath it was a small note, written in shaky handwriting. Nyan, I owe you an apology. I placed everything back in the box. My throat tightened. I didn't understand everything, but one thing I knew for sure: this wasn't just an abandoned grave. This was a lingering injustice, and my father was somehow involved. That night, I dreamed again, the same woman, but this time, she turned around. Her face wasn't clear, not frightening, but her eyes were red, filled with tears, staring at me with desperate pleading. Then a voice, soft like the wind, whispered, "Give me back my name." I jolted awake, drenched in sweat. I stayed up until morning, unable to sleep again. I knew I had to do something, to return something, though I didn't yet know what it was called. I felt that spirit had waited too long for peace. And so, I began searching for old traces, for people who remembered the past. People like Mr. Fan, and one more I never thought I'd see again, Old Man Tam. The village's former spirit medium and landseer, now living a reclusive life on the mountain. Everything was only just beginning. After that dream, my heart felt restless. It was as if someone was urging me, as if I owed a debt I couldn't repay. Even though I didn't know what or to whom, I quietly cleaned up my father's altar, wiped every picture frame, replaced the old water cup, refilled the oil lamp. While changing the altar cloth, I found a tarnished silver bracelet hidden underneath. Small, likely a woman's, with a scratched amethyst stone. I had never seen my father wear it. I picked it up, and my heart froze. As soon as I touched it, an image flashed in my mind. A late afternoon field. Someone standing under the jackfruit tree. The next day, I returned to the gravesite. The wind was still. Gray clouds hung low. As I approached, I saw someone standing beneath the jackfruit tree about 20 steps away. A woman, in a brown blouse, long hair, standing sideways, facing the river, motionless. I called out, but she turned. Not to look at me, but toward the gravestone. I took one more step. She immediately turned away and quietly walked toward the forest. "Miss," I called, but she didn't stop. Her figure slowly disappeared behind the trees. I rushed to the jackfruit tree. There were fresh footprints in the damp soil, but absolutely no one around. I stood there for a while, then silently lit an incense stick at the grave. The smoke hovered low, circling without rising. I didn't know if she was of this world or not, but something deep inside told me I had to keep searching. That evening, I visited Aunt Bay, the oldest woman in the village, who used to live next to my father. When she saw me, she was surprised. "Wah, you look so worn lately. Your eyes, they've lost their spirit. You've seen something, haven't you?" I was caught off guard, but I nodded slightly. "Yes, I saw a woman in brown, under the jackfruit tree, near the grave I just rebuilt." Aunt Bay fell silent. Then she gently said, "That's where Nyan used to stand. Every time she was upset with your father, she'd go there and sit for hours without a word." I was stunned. Back then, what was she to my father? She sighed. "Well, it's complicated. They loved each other, but your dad was forced to marry someone else. Nyan refused to accept it, left home for a few days, then returned to sell sweet soup for a living. After that, she disappeared. No one dared speak about it. Rumors spread. Some even said she followed a spirit medium and was killed for black magic." I shivered, but I didn't believe in those ghost stories. I just thought, maybe Nyan had died unjustly. And if my father was involved, maybe he lived with that guilt all his life, so deep. He couldn't say a word in his final years. I thanked Aunt Bay and left, my heart heavy. That night, it rained softly. I sat in the back kitchen, Looking out into the backyard, the sound of rain on the tin roof was cold, but familiar. As I sipped hot tea, I heard a dog howl from behind the house. I stood and looked through the window slit. Behind the banana trees, I saw a figure pass by. I gripped the silver bracelet, still in my shirt pocket, and for a split second, I felt a chill run down my spine. A whisper, neither male nor female, came through the rain. "Don't forget me." I spun around. No one there, only the wind. But I knew, I had just touched a memory that my whole village, my whole family, had tried to forget. And I, the last one left in the old house, couldn't pretend anymore. Ever since the figure in the brown blouse appeared beneath the jackfruit tree, I felt as if I were living in two parallel worlds, one filled with the familiar rhythm of village life, the other unraveling fragments of blurred memories. By day, I still tended the garden, cooked, swept the yard as I had for years. But every night, my heart grew heavy. A sense that something was still unclear kept me uneasy. I remembered the small wooden box my father once kept at the bottom drawer of the old desk, the one passed down from my grandfather. Made of jackfruit wood, its varnish long worn off. I had never opened it. While he was alive, my father warned us not to touch it. But now, I thought I should. I fetched the small key hanging in the back kitchen, where he used to keep old things. The wooden box was still there, heavy with years of dust. I opened it. Inside were a few small items, a yellowed letter, a frayed hair tie, a handkerchief embroidered with the initials NT, and a photograph. The photo was blurry, but I recognized the people in it instantly, my father, and a woman standing beside him, wearing a brown blouse, holding a bundle of fresh tea leaves. They stood on a patch of bare earth, with the shadow of a jackfruit tree faintly in the background. It was the very site of the abandoned grave today. Below the photo, written in ink, were the words, "I was wrong. Nyan, please forgive me." I held the photo, heart tightening. So, my father once loved Nyan, and he had been the last person to accompany her to that place. I recalled what Aunt Bay had said, the way Mr. Fan had once hinted. Everything was beginning to link together. But it wasn't enough. I needed to hear more. I needed someone who had seen it with their own eyes. That afternoon, I went to visit Mr. Tam, our village's old land reader and grave seer from my father's time. He was over 80 now, living alone on a small hill, surrounded by rice fields and the scent of incense. As soon as he saw me, he said, "I knew you'd come, because you touched that place." I was surprised. "How did you know?" He lit his pipe, took a long drag, then slowly replied, "That place, I once chose the land for it. But not for burial. It was chosen to hide something no one dared speak of. Your father asked me to find a spot no one would ever visit, so that no one would remember the one buried beneath." I didn't ask questions, because honestly, I was scared too. I clenched my fists. "Do you know who lies beneath?" He shook his head. "I can't be sure, but days later, I heard a woman had gone missing. Then I saw your father returning there often, always lighting incense, sitting for a long time. One day it rained heavily, and he still sat there, soaked." I stayed silent. Part of me didn't want to believe my father had anything to do with the death of the woman he loved. But all signs pointed to the same truth. It was an unclean death, and a spirit yet to find peace. That night, I dreamed again, but this time, it wasn't just the woman in brown. There was a little girl, about 6 or 7 years old, hair tied in 2 ponytails, wearing a red floral shirt, standing beside the grave, staring at me. In the dream, she said nothing, just reached out and handed me the very photo I had found that morning. I woke up with my heart racing, my forehead drenched in sweat. Dawn had not yet broken, but I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep again. I sat at my father's altar, lit 3 incense sticks, and placed the photo down. I whispered, "If there's anything you haven't told me, I'll find out. Please don't hold it in any longer. Don't let the one beneath remain full of sorrow." The incense smoke curled upward, then suddenly shifted direction, though there was no wind. I sat still for a long time. Then, a soft knock sounded from the drawer where I had taken the photo. Just one knock, but it was enough for me to understand. Something was beginning to reveal itself. And there was no turning back. Ever since the dream of the girl in red, I was no longer the same. Not in a fearful way, but in a sense that something was waiting to be uncovered. Like a memory that didn't belong to me but demanded to be remembered and understood. Each morning, I found myself walking past the old storage shed behind the garden, staring at the weathered wooden door with its rusted latch. That shed had always been tightly locked by my father. After he passed, I rarely opened it. Inside were old tools, leftover bricks and mortar, a few hoes and shovels with broken handles. But after all that had happened, I felt something else was hidden there. That morning, the fog was thick. I brought a flashlight and opened the shed door. A damp, musty smell rose. I cleared through each pile, each wooden crate. Finally, in a dusty cobweb-covered corner, I found a small wooden chest, about a foot long, half a meter in width. On the lid was a faintly carved letter, N. I froze. My hands trembled. I didn't know if it was from the cold, the mist, or some unseen fear. I carried the chest outside, setting it in the yard. The sky was overcast, but one ray of light pierced through the clouds and shone directly where I stood. I opened the lid. Inside were an old hair wrap, a broken silver necklace, and a handwritten letter. I picked up the letter. The paper was fragile, the ink smudged in many places, but I could still make out a few lines. Nyan, I'm sorry. I couldn't save you. That night, they wouldn't let you leave. I had no choice but to leave you behind. But I swear, I won't let anyone forget you, even if it's just in an unnamed grave. I sat there in the yard, my heart gripped in pain. So, my father had tried to save her, but someone had stopped him. Who, and why? That evening, I met with Mr. Fan again. As soon as he saw me, he said, "So, you found it?" I asked directly. That night, who stopped my father? Did someone know, but kept silent? He looked into the distance, voice low. Back then, there was a group of young men who drank and gambled together. They suspected Nyan of stealing something and detained her. Your father begged, pleaded, but was beaten. In the end, they tied her up. One of them said, "Bury her. Make sure she never talks again." A chill ran down my spine. Mr. Fan continued, "Your father wanted to report it to the village, but I stopped him. I was afraid of being dragged in, afraid of the consequences." From that day, he lived like a cursed man. I looked at him, my voice strained. And the others? Some fled the village and were never seen again. Some died young, others cried out in the night. I don't know if it was karma or guilt, but I do know, you are the last one tied to this story. And if you don't end it, it won't stop. That night, I held the small chest and placed it on my father's altar. I looked at his photo and whispered, "Father, I will make things right. Even if it's just lighting incense for her with her proper name. Even if it's rebuilding the gravestone with her full name. Date of birth, date of death, I promise." As the incense smoke rose, the desk lamp flickered off. A knock sounded at the window. I stepped outside. The wind was still, but on the glass was the outline of a small hand, like the moisture left behind after a gentle touch. I placed my hand over it, and for the first time in many nights, I felt it clearly. Someone was waiting for me to do what's right. I sat beside my father's altar the entire night. The scent of incense lingered, soaking into my hair, my clothes, into every crease of time inside the old house. Each time I looked at that black and white photo of him, I saw those eyes again, once calm and quiet, now carrying thousands of unspoken things. I suddenly recalled my father's final years. He barely spoke, rarely smiled. He just sat by the window, staring out into the backyard, toward the jackfruit tree and the moss-covered wall. Back then, I was young, too busy making a living to care. I thought he was just old, senile, reliving memories, but now I realize he had been living with a vow of silence. A penance that lasted until the end of his days. I pulled out an old notebook and started writing down what I needed to do. Erect a new headstone for Nyan. Try to find her birth date. Prepare a ceremony to ask for forgiveness. And if possible, recover her remains and move them to a cleaner, more respectful place. The next morning, I went to the county market to find Mr. Liu, the man who carved stone headstones. I brought with me a hand-drawn sketch of the tombstone. Simple, clean, and with just one line engraved clearly. Nguyen T. Nhan died 1989, a life no one remembered. But someone never forgot. Mr. Liu looked at the paper, surprised. This line, it sounds like there's a story behind it. Is this an unclaimed grave? I nodded. It used to be, but not anymore. I rebuilt it, and I'm the one who needs to apologize to her. He looked at me for a long while, then nodded. Then let it be made with sincerity. I won't charge you. That afternoon, I returned to the village and stopped by the old house across the hamlet, where my father was born. Now abandoned, I went inside to search for an old sheet listing the birth dates of family members. Among the brittle pages, I found Nyan's name, written in purple ink, with her birth date beside it. I noted it down and walked to the back garden, where I remembered a small mound of earth, no stone, no incense, no flowers, just a tilted rock, no one knew since when. I dug a small corner. Beneath the thin layer of soil were a few old bricks laid as a base, and a piece of red cloth, now rotten. I knew my father had once dug here. That night, I told Mr. Fan everything. He was silent for a long time. Then he quietly said, "Your father once bowed to me 3 times, begging me not to say anything." He said, "I buried her beneath the house. Then I moved her to the place with the jackfruit tree, hoping it would keep her cool, so she wouldn't resent me anymore." I clenched my fists. "So, he once buried her inside the house?" He nodded. "Back then, burying someone with an unclear cause of death was terrifying to the whole village. Your father kept it a secret. Said she went missing. Later, fearing the house was cursed, he quietly moved her elsewhere." I sat in silence. Half my heart ached for my father. The other half grieved for the ill-fated girl. If she had lived, she'd be my age now. Maybe our families would have stayed close. Shared meals during the annual ancestor rites, like old neighbors often did. That night, I placed the new headstone at the grave, lit 3 sticks of incense, and sat silently for a long time. I said nothing, only thought quietly, "Miss, if you can hear me, please forgive my father. As for me, I'll do everything I can to make things right." As the incense neared its end, I saw a faint light pass by. Not bright, not dim, just a thin wisp of smoke, circling the grave once before disappearing into the jackfruit tree. I couldn't be sure I really saw it, but from that day on, my heart felt lighter, and at night, the knocking sounds and shadowy dreams stopped. Only one dream remained, of a woman in a brown blouse, standing under the jackfruit tree, her back turned, gently brushing her hand along the brand new stone, then slowly fading into the pale evening sky. I believed she understood, and she finally let go. After placing the new headstone and offering incense to Nyan, a sense of peace settled over me. I thought everything was over. I had done all I could. But life doesn't always end with an apology. About a week later, while I was sweeping the yard, someone came looking for me. A stranger, tall, graying hair, wearing an old white shirt and leather sandals. He stood at my gate for quite a while, saying nothing. When I stepped out to ask, he finally spoke, slowly. "Hello, Mr. Wah. I'm Fan, also from the Fan family. You probably don't remember me, but I know the story of your father well." I was surprised. The name Fan wasn't unfamiliar, but I had never met this man. I invited him in. We sat in the shade of the areca palm behind the house, where my father used to sit years ago. He looked around, his eyes searching the air for something unseen. "Your father and I were colleagues in the grave digging group back then." No one knew, because I had come from the neighboring commune. But the two of us, we buried someone together. I gripped my fingers tightly but said nothing. Her name was Nyan. His voice dropped, barely above a whisper. "That day, it rained. She was tied up, beaten. I saw everything, but I didn't stop it. I was afraid, weak, and your father, he was the only one who dared to speak up, to beg for her life. But in the end, he still helped carry her body to the forest edge." I choked up. Mr. Fan took a folded piece of paper from his pocket and opened it. It was a hand-drawn map, a diagram of the old burial site with clear markings. There was a red dot next to a large rock, near the forest's edge, where an old banyan tree wrapped around ancient graves. A place no one dared approach. Later, your father came back looking. He told me, "I can't rest. I have to fix this properly. If not, she'll follow me to my death." I know, he tried. But it wasn't enough. No apology ritual. No one ever spoke the truth. I asked softly, "Why did you come to me now?" "To say my final words. I'm leaving soon. Illness that can't be cured. I don't want to carry this shadow into the grave. I want to make amends. I've kept something of Nyan's since that night. Here." He pulled out a small wooden comb, worn down, with the initials NT carved on the back. I took it, my hand trembling. It was identical to the one my father had once kept in the wooden box. I looked at him, voice trembling. "Why only now?" Mr. Fan sighed. "Because of fear, shame. I thought the dead should be forgotten. But that's not true. Every time I sleep, I still see her eyes. Not angry, just sad. And that sadness, that's what tortures the living most." I didn't know what to say. I just sat in silence. He stood, slowly walking toward the gate. Before he left, he turned back. "Thank you for doing the right thing. Because of that, I can finally face her in my dreams, without bowing my head." That night, I lit incense for Nyan again. Placed the wooden comb beside the stone. The ridges of the comb pressed into my palm. A quiet reminder that some wrongs can never be erased, only repaid with sincerity. As the incense neared its end, I stepped into the house, about to close the door. Suddenly, a gust of wind rose, lifting the ash into a swirling spiral across the yard. In that moment, I saw a figure standing next to the areca tree, slender, in a brown blouse, long hair. Her face was unclear, but no longer shrouded in mist. I wasn't afraid, I simply nodded. And when I looked again, there was nothing left but the sound of fallen leaves brushing softly across the old brick floor. I thought everything had come to an end after Mr. Fan left. I had placed the headstone, burned incense, apologized. Those involved had spoken their truths. But as it turns out, that was only the surface. The deeper part still lay hidden beneath layers of soil, bricks, and old memories no one dared to uncover. That day, I visited Nyan's grave as usual. The sky was still overcast, the previous night's rain leaving puddles around the edges of the grass. As I approached, I froze. The concrete around the base of the grave had cracked. A deep diagonal fracture ran from the top left to the bottom right, as if something from below had pushed upward. I knelt down and tapped gently on the concrete. The sound echoed hollow, unnaturally so. I couldn't believe my eyes. It had only been a few weeks. The cement should have been solid as stone. Why did it break? That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 3 a.m., I heard a soft creak from the yard. I stepped out, instinctively looking toward the grave. In the pale moonlight, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The cracked concrete from yesterday had broken entirely. A chunk had collapsed inward. Debris scattered around, as if something, or someone, had broken through from inside. I walked closer, heart pounding. In the dim light, I saw that beneath the broken slab was not earth, but a hollow space, about the length of a hand. And inside, something glinted. The next morning, I called Uncle Bay, a fellow grave builder from my earlier days. I said, "Uncle, can you help me dig this spot? I don't think it's just bones buried beneath." He looked at me, slightly worried. "Digging up a new grave? Aren't you afraid of disturbing the dead?" I replied slowly, "I'm not afraid of the dead. I'm afraid of the living who keep hiding their wrongs and refusing to face them." We began digging layer by layer. Under the broken concrete was a patch of soil with a different color, clay mixed with rubble. As if someone had quickly covered something up. A few more inches down, we hit a small black lacquered wooden box. Not large but heavy. I opened the lid. Inside was an old journal and a folded piece of white silk. The journal was aged. The handwriting inside was my father's. It was a diary. Day, month, year. They took her, thinking she stole something. I knew she was innocent. I begged. I bowed to every one of them. But no one believed me. They beat her. They laughed. And they left. I stayed behind. Fan and I buried her. I was wrong. Deeply wrong. But if I hadn't done it, they would have come back. They would have dug her up, done worse. I just wanted for her to be at peace. In any way I could. I flipped to the last page. The words trembled across the paper. I don't ask for forgiveness. I only hope someone, someday, will speak the truth. So she won't have to break through the concrete to be free. I closed the journal. Taking a deep breath, the concrete didn't break on its own. It was a message. A reminder that you can't suppress something that has already rotted from within. That evening, I placed the journal on my father's altar. I lit a stick of incense and whispered, "I understand now, Father. The truth isn't meant to be buried. It's meant to live, even if it hurts." A gust of wind blew in, curling the incense ash with a faint hiss. I looked up at the altar, my father's photo blurred in the smoke. But his eyes, they glowed more clearly than ever. No longer sad, no longer silent. And I believe, in that moment, he finally exhaled, releasing the weight of a 30-year burden. From the day I found my father's journal, it felt as though I had stepped out of a decades-long, heavy dream. But the lighter my heart became, the clearer I saw, there was still something left unresolved. I brought the journal to Heen, my nephew, who worked at a printing shop in town and was meticulous by nature. I asked him to type it out for preservation. After reading, he sat quietly for a long time, then said, "Uncle, there's a part in the diary I want to ask about. Your father wrote, she didn't die alone. She left with the child." I was stunned. A child? No one had ever mentioned this. Nyan had a baby? Then, what happened to the child? That whole afternoon, I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept circling the same question, if there really was a child. What became of them? Did they share the same tragic fate as their mother? That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I drifted into a dream. In it, I saw a vast field. Knee-high grass swaying in the mist. In the middle stood a small figure in a red shirt. Hair tied in 2 pigtails. Back turned to me. I approached. The closer I got, the colder the air became. The child didn't turn around, but spoke, her voice clear and soft, yet filled with sorrow. "Uncle, they hid my mom too well. No one remembers that she held me. She cried, a lot. I wanted to say something, but no words came out." She continued, "My mom never got to be called by name. I never got a name either. The wind blows past the grave, but no one knows, 2 people lie beneath." I woke up, drenched in cold sweat. The clock read 3:30 a.m. I got up and opened my father's journal again, scanning every page, and there it was, a faint sentence buried between 2 lines. "I'm sorry I couldn't save both of them." The next morning, I returned to the grave. Looking carefully, I noticed the earth behind the headstone was slightly raised, as if someone had added extra soil. I asked Uncle Bay to come back. We gently dug the back area. Beneath the soil was a decayed cloth wrapped around something small, about the size of a little chest. Inside was a child's wool sweater and a silver ring small enough to fit a pinky finger. My throat tightened. Nyan hadn't gone alone. I sat quietly by the grave for a long time, then whispered, "Miss Nyan, I don't know if you ever blamed my father. But I believe there's one thing you always wanted. For your daughter to be called by name. To be remembered, even if it's just one line on a headstone. So that both of you aren't lost forever in the wind." I placed the sweater and ring into a small wooden box, buried it beside the stone, and covered it gently, like wrapping my arms around a fragile soul. That afternoon, I had another line etched onto the headstone, and a child who never opened her eyes, still resting beside her mother. That night, I slept the deepest sleep I'd had in months. In my dream, I saw the child again, smiling. She held the hand of a woman in a brown blouse. Together, they walked into the golden dusk, light as clouds, peaceful as if they had never carried sorrow. I woke up with only one thought left in my heart. I had done the right thing. And if anyone still remembers, please remember fully. Not just the names of the grown, but the silent cries of the little ones we once forgot. After that final night when I dreamed of Nyan and her child smiling as they walked away, I thought everything had come to an end. The grave now rested peacefully beneath the old jackfruit tree. The new headstone stood tall. The incense no longer burned backwards, and my sleep was no longer broken like the nights before. But then, one afternoon at the start of the month, I returned to the old house, where my father had spent his final years. Now left vacant for a long time, I intended to tidy things up a bit, to keep the place respectful. As soon as I stepped inside, the smell of dampness hit me from the middle room. Underneath the altar cabinet, wedged between two loose planks, was a thin notebook. I pulled it out. It was another journal, not the one I'd found before. This one was smaller. Its cover decayed, but the first page still held a trembling line in fountain pen ink, written for the things never spoken. I sat down on the old wooden platform and flipped through the pages. Each word felt like it touched my skin. Each entry was a slice of the past. Some lines were brief, others longer, but all carried the weight of quiet regret. Day, month, year? I know I was wrong. I couldn't save her. I couldn't save the child. But if I spoke up, the whole village would have turned on me. I was afraid they'd never forgive me. So I chose silence. But every time I see the wind move across the yard, every time a raindrop hits the soil, I think of those tear-filled eyes. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from sorrow. Sorrow for a man who, out of fear and pride, had lived his entire life in shadow. In another part, my father wrote, "Fan once told me, a grave without a name is easy to forget. But if the name is wrong, the soul won't rest." I stayed silent, because I didn't dare write the truth. I couldn't bring myself to carve the name, Nyan. I closed the journal and sat by the old table for a long while. I felt as though my father were sitting beside me, saying nothing, just looking at me, hoping I'd understand, hoping I'd forgive him. I brought the journal home. That night, I lit an incense stick, placed the journal next to my father's photo, and said, "Father, if you could speak now, I want you to know, I'm not angry at you. But I can't go on living in silence like you did. I need to speak, so others will know, so future children won't carry pain buried deep in the earth like before." After that prayer, I felt nothing strange, no knocking sounds, no shadows, just a feeling, light as the breeze, brushing past the back of my neck. A few days later, I asked Heen to type out the journal. No edits, no omissions. I bound it into a booklet and brought it to the village communal house, asking to place it in the reading room. At first, the elders were hesitant, but after reading a few pages, Elder 2, the oldest in the village, said, "This should not be hidden anymore. Those who were wrong have paid the price. But the living must know. To stop, to change, to feel compassion." That afternoon, I sat in the temple courtyard, watching the children play. A little girl ran by, her hair tied in pigtails, wearing a red shirt. I froze for a moment. But then, she turned back and smiled, calling for her mother before running off again. I exhaled, feeling relieved. In life, some things don't need to be said aloud. As long as we live rightly, that's enough. I stood up and looked toward the old jackfruit tree at the edge of the village. Its shadow still stretched long, covering the grave. The wind blew by, carrying with it the scent of old earth and incense smoke. I knew everything had finally settled, but the story still needed to be told. Not to dwell on guilt, but to preserve compassion. I used to think that once a sorrow ran its course, people would stop speaking of it. But the closer I came to the depths of memory, the more I realized some pain is not meant to be forgotten, but remembered. After my father's journal was placed in the village temple, several people came to see me. Some asked outright, "Was it all true?" Others said nothing, simply stood before the grave, whispered a few prayers, and left. I didn't blame anyone. Everyone has their own way of facing the past. Some choose to hold it in, some choose to speak it. As for me, I choose to preserve it through action. On the full moon night that month, I returned to the old house to light incense for my father and for Nyan and her child. The air was unusually still. The full moon cast a silver glow over the yard. I placed 3 incense sticks at my father's altar, and 3 at the stone outside. I brought a large candle, an old-style one left behind from my grandfather's time, and placed it in the center of the yard. I lit it, and its soft yellow light spread over the grave like a gentle veil of mist. As I was sorting through some offering papers, the wind suddenly picked up, and the candle blew out. The space around me darkened. Then, the wind chime hanging from the eaves began to tinkle, softly, but clearly, each sound crisp and distinct. I wasn't frightened, I simply looked up. The moon had disappeared behind the clouds. The entire yard faded into a grayish hue. I stood and stepped onto the porch. Outside, the shadow of the tree leaned across the ground, and in the midst of that darkness, there was a figure. A person, slender, standing by the fence, face hidden, hands at their sides, completely still. I saw only the hem of their blouse fluttering in the wind. But there were no footsteps, no rustling leaves. I whispered, "Who's there?" No reply. The figure slowly turned and walked toward the narrow path leading out to the village edge. Only a faint scent of incense lingered in the air. I grabbed my flashlight and scanned the ground in front of the gate. There was a footprint, faintly pressed into the moist earth. Small, like a woman's, not deep, but real enough. The next morning, I told Elder too. He nodded slowly. Well, not all spirits return for vengeance. Some just come back to look at what was once home, especially on full moon nights. That's when the boundary between us and them is thinner than a strand of hair. I asked quietly, "Do you think it was Nyan?" He replied, "Could be. Or maybe someone else who knew the story." Some souls don't demand anything. They just want to be remembered, with one true glance. And that glance must be sincere. I said nothing. That afternoon, I went to the market and bought a new wind chime to hang on the eaves. Not to summon spirits, but to remind me, every time it rings, that there was once a time of silence. And it was that silence that gave later words their meaning. That night, I sat alone on the porch. The wind blew gently. The chime rang again, soft, even, and clear. No longer frantic, no longer cold, just like someone whispering near my ear. "I heard you." And I understood, it was time to close the story. Not to forget, but to preserve, to keep in my heart a quiet place, where there is no resentment, no suppression, only the gentle light of an apology that has been accepted. I thought that after the full moon night, after the candle had gone out and the wind chime had gently rung, everything had truly come to an end, but perhaps with something that had been buried for nearly half a lifetime. Peace doesn't come that easily. One day, Uncle Bay came to my house. He handed me an old hand-drawn map, its edges worn thin. He said, "Your father gave this to me long ago. He told me, if I die before Wa, make sure you give this to him. He needs to know." I unfolded it. It was a sketch of the land behind the village. where the old shrine stood near the bamboo forest, abandoned for years. On the map, 2 locations were marked. One was Nyan's grave. The other was a second burial site, deeper behind the shrine. Beside it, faintly written in purple ink, were the words, "Leave it. Don't disturb." I held the map, my chest heavy. At the time, I didn't understand why my father had left that instruction. I went to find Elder Tu and asked about the old shrine. He sighed. That shrine used to honor a woman who watched over the village cemetery long ago. She died with no children, so the villagers built the shrine for her. Once, some kids dug around and uncovered part of a wooden coffin. After that, one of them had a terrible fever for a whole week. We sealed it off and abandoned the place ever since. I asked, "Do you know who was buried there?" He shook his head. "No one knows for sure. But there was a rumor back then. A young girl went missing. The whole village searched and never found her. People suspected she was hidden beneath that shrine. But over time, the story faded, and no one spoke of it again." Hearing that, my heart tightened. I immediately thought of the girl in my dream, the little one in the red shirt. With a soft, sorrowful voice. That night, I took a flashlight, a bundle of incense, and a small shovel. I followed the map to the back of the shrine. The grass reached my knees. The air was still, broken only by the sounds of insects and rustling bamboo leaves. When I reached the marked spot, I stopped. In the beam of the flashlight, I saw a raised mound of earth, nestled against the stone wall behind the shrine. I lit 3 sticks of incense, then dug a few shallow layers. Beneath the clay was a ring of stones, and in the center, a decayed wooden plank. I didn't dig further. I placed my hand on the plank, closed my eyes, and softly said, "If you're lying here, I'm sorry. I don't mean to disturb you. I just want to know, has anyone ever remembered you?" Just then, a gust of wind blew through. The flashlight flickered, casting its light across the shrine wall, where a tiny carving was etched, "Hi." I stood frozen. No one had ever mentioned that name. It wasn't in any village record. But now, I believed I knew what the little girl's name was. I returned home and added one more line to the old stone behind the house. And someone named Hai, small, but never forgotten. The next morning, I told Heen about what I found. He sat quietly for a moment, then said, "Uncle, I think some spirits don't need anything repaid. They just want to be named. It's how people hold on to each other in this life, with one remembered name." That night, the wind chime on the porch rang again. Not hurried, not startling, just steadily, like tiny footsteps running around the yard of the old house. I sat under the porch, looking into the distance, toward the jackfruit tree, the old shrine, and all the names I thought had vanished with time. But in truth, they had only been waiting for someone to remember. And I understood that someone was me. A week after discovering the name Hai behind the old shrine, I still didn't feel at peace, even though I had placed her name next to her mother's on the grave. Even though the wind chime no longer rang suddenly at night, something still felt unfinished. I told the story to Aunt Tam, the woman who used to help with funerals in the old days. She was elderly, but still sharp. As soon as she heard it, she furrowed her brow. I remember, there was a missing girl once. But later, people said her parents moved away. No one talked about it again. No funeral, no mourning. It always struck me as odd, a child gone. And no one grieved. I asked, "Do you think we should hold a spirit calling ceremony? A proper farewell, even if no family is around?" She looked at me for a long while, then nodded. "Yes, it should be done. Doesn't need to be grand. Just someone to remember, someone to send her off. That's what makes a grave have a soul." I began preparing. I bought white flowers, a small cloth, some milk candies, and a ball of rice with salt. I didn't know what the little girl once liked, but I imagined she might enjoy the scent of flowers, the feel of soft pastries, and someone standing nearby, calling her by her name. I chose a day near the end of the month, when the air began to turn crisp. That morning, Heen and I brought the offerings and walked to the back of the shrine, to the mound where I'd once found the second grave. We placed everything down, lit the incense, and I began the prayer. Not a scripted one, not from any ceremonial book, just words from my heart. Little girl named Hai, if you can hear me, I ask to stand in for the grown-ups, to send you off. Even just a little way. You've lain silently here long enough. Today, we hold a small farewell. No drums, no gongs, but your name is spoken. You are called, and you are seen, by those who will not look away. The wind rose, rustling the bamboo beside the shrine. The incense curled, its smoke trailing with the breeze but never going out. I could feel something shifting, subtle, unseen, but very real. Heen stood beside me, his eyes misty. Uncle, for a child to lie for decades without anyone calling her name, and now to have a grave to be prayed for, she must be so happy. After the small ceremony, I placed a simple headstone behind the shrine. No elaborate carvings, just a single line. For a little soul named Hai, who left in silence, but is remembered with a full heart. That afternoon, I walked back through the village, passing a group of children jumping rope. A little girl in a red shirt ran past, her hair tied in 2 ponytails, laughing brightly. She didn't look at me, but just as I stopped in place, she turned, nodded softly. I stood still, unsure whether it was a dream or a trick of the mind. But I knew, someone had received that farewell. That night, I sat under the porch. The breeze brushed past, soft as a hand through hair. The wind chime rang faintly, then fell silent. No knocking, no footsteps, only peace, like the final farewell of a soul, fading gently behind the mountains. And I understood, some things, when done right, don't need praise, but someone will finally rest. After the farewell ceremony for the little girl named Hai, I felt a weight lift from my chest. The nameless grave behind the shrine now had a place where someone could stop, light a stick of incense. Not everyone would know, not everyone would remember, but as long as one person keeps the memory, one voice says the name, that is enough. I returned to the old house, where my father had spent his final years. I planned to clean up the brick shed out back before the rainy season arrived. I was worried that the bricks might rot, collapse, and become dangerous. While clearing the farthest corner, I discovered a pile of bricks stacked haphazardly. Perhaps my father had brought them from somewhere long ago but never used them. Looking closer, I was startled. On a few bricks were strange markings. Not letters, but faint fingernail impressions, still visible. I lifted each brick with an odd feeling. These bricks weren't new. They were very old, fired clay with a muted tone, like the kind used to build simple graves in the past. That night, I sat before my father's altar, holding one of the bricks with the marks still intact. Father, did you bring these home because you didn't want people stepping on them? Because the soul underneath hadn't found peace? Or was this something you kept to remember? That night, I dreamed, but for the first time, not of Nyan or the little girl. I dreamed of my father. He stood in the old brick shed, sleeves rolled high, sweat staining his back, stacking bricks one by one. I stepped closer, about to call out, but he only turned his head without speaking, then placed the final brick down. On that brick was a faint engraving of a single word: repay. I woke up. The sky was still dark. The wind chime didn't ring. Everything was still, but my heart was restless. The next morning, I brought the bricks out to the patch of land near the jackfruit tree, the place where I had rebuilt that first forgotten grave. I arranged the usable bricks as a border for the grave. The broken ones, I used to form a small step at the foot. An elder in the village passed by, paused to look, and asked, "These look like the old cemetery bricks." I remember my grandfather saying, anyone who took bricks from a grave to build their house never knew peace. I nodded. Yes, so I'm returning them. No one will step on them. No one will forget. I'm giving them back to the earth, so the ones who've gone before won't hold any more sorrow. That evening, I lit incense for all 3 graves, Nyan, the little girl Hai, and a third small grave beside them, unmarked. Unknown. I didn't know who that person was. But if they now lay under the same tree, I believed they must have known one another. Or at least, they had suffered the same way. The wind swept through. The wind chime rang gently. At that moment, I heard a soft whisper in my ear. That's enough. I didn't turn around. I wasn't afraid. I simply bowed my head. Allow me to return these old bricks to those who once needed them. And when I looked up again, the sky was beginning to brighten. In the soft light of a new day, the old bricks, rough, faded, still lay quietly in place. But somehow, they looked lighter. The color of peace. That December, the weather in my village was colder than usual. The northern wind blew in waves, carrying the scent of burning straw, lingering incense, and the quiet edge of an ending season. I spent nearly the whole month replanting the vegetable beds behind the house, repainting the wooden fence, and cleaning up the jackfruit and bamboo roots that had been with me for more than half a lifetime. Each afternoon, I still visited those 3 familiar graves, Nyan, Hai, and the unmarked one I quietly called the silent grave. No one claimed it, no one came, but after everything that had happened, it felt like the 3 of them had come together into one peaceful place, a quiet corner where things once forgotten could rest. That morning, I visited the graves early. I brought a bundle of incense, some white chrysanthemums, and 3 small stones. On each, I wrote a word in chalk: remember, love, and peace. I placed them on each grave, like a final promise for the year. As I was about to scatter the flowers around the jackfruit tree, I heard footsteps behind me. Light, very light, not hurried, not loud. I turned. A woman was walking past the dirt path that led to the bamboo forest. She wore a dark brown blouse, her hair neatly tied back, her pace unhurried, her shadow stretched long across the gray soil, gliding past the 3 graves, before stopping beside Nyan's. She stood there. She didn't bow, didn't light incense, just looked. For a long time, I stood frozen, not out of fear, but out of a strange feeling, like I had seen her before. In another life, I stepped forward, about to speak, when she turned and nodded gently. No smile, no words, but in her eyes was a quiet peace I couldn't name. Then she walked away, toward the bamboo grove. I wanted to follow, but just past the bend, she vanished. I returned and looked at the grave. The wind blew sideways, bending the incense stick. On the headstone, the chrysanthemum petals had fallen, right on the word, love. I don't know who she was, but I believe she came for one final glance. Or perhaps she had once lived here, once lay here, once loved this place and could not leave. That night, I sat under the porch and wrote a few lines in my old notebook. The dead don't need endless offerings. They just need the living to believe. Each time we step toward someone's grave with sincerity, we help them rest a little more. The next morning, I stepped into the yard. The wind chime didn't ring. No one knocked. But in the garden, beneath the tree where she once stood, a chrysanthemum bloomed late, unexpectedly. I knelt down, picked up a petal, and whispered, "If you were the one who walked by, please know this. The one in the grave has been named, has been given presence again, and those who remain have learned to live slower, deeper, and love more." A breeze passed through. I heard nothing more, but I saw, as if a fold of fabric had just disappeared behind the areca trees at the gate. No more knocking, no more restless dreams, only footsteps, gentle ones, passing through each other's lives so quietly. Thank you for walking with me to the end of this journey. A journey not only about the departed, but a quiet reminder for the living, that sometimes, a name spoken aloud, a single incense stick, or even just a bowed head, is enough to bring peace to someone, and to ourselves. If this journey has touched you, feel free to subscribe, so you won't miss the next story.